because it's painful. But if we endure through that, what do you get? You get patience, you get a different perspective on things, but only if you, again, discipline the mind to look at it that way. Welcome back, everyone. We are looking back at this past week's Sunday readings and looking ahead to next Sunday's readings. We know that most people attending Mass don't look ahead to the readings they'll be hearing. So I hope you'll find our little show fun and useful, especially if you're looking to connect more to the Bible readings during Mass. My name is Vincent and my buddy's name is Roy. We've been friends since childhood, and we both volunteer at different churches as lectors, or the guys who read at Mass. We'll offer our thoughts on the readings, as well as share some fun stories about volunteering at church and everyday life. Okay, let's get started. Okay, new week. What did we do this weekend? Well, the last preseason game that we went to was pretty fun. So big thank you again. Roy and I got to catch up on not just the game, but like on life in general a little bit. You might think we call or text each other all the time, but we actually don't do much outside this podcast time. The occasional text. It was good to hang out with you and your brother. And also, last week, after Yosemite, we came home, unfortunately, to a broken refrigerator. So we had to buy a new one last week.
So yeah, for me, this has been kind of an annual early birthday gift to you. You've always taken last preseason game, and we won!
I'll put the picture right here.
I also went to this R&B brunch in the Bayview Club. Basically, it was like a high school dance because I was invited from my high school friends. You know, it was just a bunch of high school playing 90s R&B and hip hop. Lorraine invited one of the gymnastics parents. My cousin was there, just meeting people left and right. It was crazy. It's like, oh, like I said, high school.
All right, let's look ahead to the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time. The first reading is from the book of Sirach, which is one of the wisdom books of the Old Testament. Here, it says to conduct your affairs with humility, to appreciate proverbs, and to have an attentive ear. The responsorial is from Psalm 68, which says, God, in your goodness, you have made a home for the poor. So the poor is going to come up again, so listen for that. The second reading is taken from the letter to the Hebrews, where St. Paul describes the heavenly Jerusalem and what it looks like, with countless angels and a festal gathering, with God, the judge of all, and the spirits of the just made perfect. So he really describes this heavenly Jerusalem. And finally, the gospel is from Luke, and this is where Jesus is dining at the home of one of the Pharisee leaders. He tells the other guests in a parable of how you should not take the seat of honor when invited as a guest. So the main idea here is that those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Then he goes further to say that when you hold a banquet, don't invite your relatives or wealthy people who can return the favor, but instead invite the poor, the crippled, the lame and blind who cannot repay you. Then will you be blessed, he says, and you will be repaid at the resurrection. So that's where the poor comes in again. He's reminding us to remember the poor. So that's what we're going to hear in the readings this coming week.
With that being said, I want to give a little bit of context. So here's a little context for the book of Sirach. Our Protestant brothers and sisters do not really consider canon, but we do. It basically is wise proverbs and poetry from a sage who teaches Jewish leaders named Yeshua ben Sirach, who wrote the book of wisdom that he synthesized from the scriptures for the next generation. This reading is taken from one of his poems on humility. It kind of feels like a nursery rhyme, so maybe you could kind of read it like that, like a grandparent teaching the grandchildren about wisdom. And then in the Psalms, it talks about helping the poor. I also want you to note the two themes in the gospel about humility and providing for the poor. So for the second reading, Paul basically is comparing the New Testament to the Old Testament, and basically how like impressive earthly things are compared to impressive heavenly things, but it's just more eloquent, more persuasive. And like I mentioned earlier about those threads between the first reading, the psalm, and the gospel, the one gospel passages combines the themes of the two separate Old Testament passages. So this brings it all into one.
Yeah, the theme for me throughout these readings totally is humility and humbleness. But like you mentioned a few months ago about placing yourself in the other person's character in a parable, many of us might easily identify with the first part of the parable, like being too arrogant and then we get humbled. But what about the second part of the parable? When do we throw a lunch or a dinner or a party or a get-together and not invite the poor, the lame, the blind, or crippled, right? But in this case, okay, maybe you don't know a crippled person, but when do we exclude those who might annoy us, right? The person who's kind of bullied sometimes, the person who's clearly like doesn't have a ton of friends, might want to belong but doesn't quite fit in. How many times do we reach out to that person who's unreach-outable? And then it's one of those situations where like some of your friends might think, like, why'd you invite so-and-so? You know? So it's kind of like, well, why not, right?
Yeah.
He's a person too. Who cares what other people might think about that? What that person thinks. That they're someone, that they're appreciated. But we all know that person who's on the outside of the group who we want to bring in.
So are you saying that me inviting you to the game is you're the poor person? You're the uninvitable.
Okay, let's look back at last weekend's readings. Roy, what do you got? I know you read last week, so I'll put a little clip right here.
A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. Do not disdain the discipline of the Lord, so strengthen your drooping hands, for what is lame may not be disjointed, but healed. The word of the Lord.
Yeah. Actually, I got some decent compliments, so I guess I did well. So in the first reading talks about the Lord will bring everybody from all nations to his holy mountain. The psalm talks about telling the whole world about the good news. So therefore, in the gospel, it mentions how the people will come from the east and the west and the north and the south to the kingdom of God. But that even people who were in the presence of the Lord, who ate and drank with him, will not get into the banquet. Compared to those, from faraway nations who just hear his word from other people. To me, it implies that the people in Jesus' presence who hear his word straight from his mouth still did evil. That's why he called them evildoers. His own childhood neighborhood wanted to throw him off a cliff. So this might be a stretch, but we can even tie in the gospel to the second reading. When Jesus said to strive to enter the narrow gate, I think strive kind of correlates to the discipline that Paul referred to in his letter.
For me, in the homily at our Mass that we attended, one of the phrases that the priest said was, it's not about the numbers. It's not about calculating requirements for salvation. Instead, focus on conversion, your inner change. And like you said, strive. So strive to do your part and keep doing it. Don't quit. The external routine, the practicing the faith aren't enough. What am I saying by that? Like just going to Mass every Sunday and calling it a day. We need, in addition to that, concrete works of love, the priest said. Being faithful in every little thing we do, whether it's like doing your work well, being kind to your parents, being kind to your coworkers and friends, or your non-friends. There's no calculation for salvation. It's like, well, I go to Mass, check that off. I give alms, check that off the button. No, it's not that. It's like, he didn't even answer the question. Like, look, strive, narrow gate. That's what you need to do. Okay, how would you read this? This is going to be taken from the first reading, which is from Sirach. So, Roy, what are the reading notes?
All right, for the reading notes, this elegant reading is rich and tender.
Sounds like a piece of meat.
With an utmost musical dictation. The tone is compassionate. In the middle, where it says, what is too sublime for you? In this line, accentuate the word not. Then in the next line, pause slightly after word strength and emphasize the word search.
All right, let's do this. The first reading.
Okay. My child, conduct your affairs with humility, and you will be loved more than the giver of gifts. Humble yourself the more, the greater you are, and you will find favor with God. What is too sublime for you, seek not. Into things beyond your strength, search not. The mind of a sage appreciates proverbs, and an attentive ear is the joy of the wise. Water quenches a flaming fire, and alms atone for sins. The word of the Lord. I just know it's just annoying because, like I said, it takes me a lot of times to practice without all of those little mistakes.
Reading a letter is different from reading a script, because a script is meant to be read out loud, whereas the letter is supposed to be read, usually silently. It's to be absorbed with your eyes and your brain versus absorbed through your ears. So it's a different composition.
Me and Lorraine were like trying to did you listen to what the reading was? To try to get the whole discipline thing. And I was actually impressed because she was asking, okay, there's 7 words that I don't understand. And she's like, I don't know what the word discipline means. I'm like, that's the whole point of the story.
That's so funny.
If you don't know what discipline is, this means nothing.
I'm assuming that you related it to gymnastics and
Exactly. Definitely use that as point of reference. Basically, there's 2 types of discipline, like the discipline of practice and repetition, habit, versus like punishment.
Right.
It points to about that in the reading about how you could persevere and practice through it.
I always equate that to like the stuff that goes on in life, like the unfair things that go on in life, a crummy health, or you get injured, or just the bad luck that you might have, or the coworker at work, or the traffic that you hit. Those are all disciplines, little punishments if you think about that, because it's painful, right? But if we endure through that, what do you get? You get patience, you get a different perspective on things, but only if you, again, discipline the mind to look at it that way. If you look at these annoying things as these injustices that are always happening to me, you're disciplining it in a different way, in a wrong way. You're learning it in a different way instead of learning it through Jesus's way, the Christian way. Like, look at these things in a different light. How can these things bring me closer to God? How can these things that make me angry, flip it around, make it turn to God? Like, how in the world would I do that? Well, discipline, and you'll get that, and it's like, it's life-changing.
I was just going to reference what you said, because I was just thinking like how long it took me to be patient with other drivers, because you know, you have drivers like cutting you off, and it's like, dude, what the heck, man?
Yeah.
And there was one time where I almost like cut somebody off, but I didn't see them.
Yeah.
And I was like really remorseful, like, oh, I didn't mean it. But then the person still drove ahead of me and like honked at me.
Yeah.
And he like really tried to cut me off, and he swerved, and I was like, dude, you could have hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it was like, my bad. He couldn't feel that from me.
Yeah.
I said, oh shoot, my bad, I'm sorry. And then he tried to cut me off, and he got more angry, and I felt bad because it could have made his day like worse. If I thought of it the other way around, I'd be like, oh, maybe something's happening, and oh, I'm sorry, you know, I didn't see you, I should have saw you. But they didn't think of that, and they get themselves into, you know, kind of a rage, and it makes their whole rest of the day worse, where you could have just, you know, put yourself in the other person's shoes and try to think, oh, that could have been me too.
Okay, how was it? I hope you got some positive takeaways from this. Leave your thoughts below in the comments, and don't just like and subscribe, but also click that share button and share this with your family and friends as well. Take care and God bless. These are all points of exercise and discipline. Every single thing is an opportunity for getting closer to God or not. And I don't mean like getting closer to God right now, but getting closer.
Well, that guy could have done it when he just tried to cut me off and crashed.
For real, right?